Well, I've been finishing off my Philco 3930 and working on a cabinet for this Brunswick set. I've also been slowly, steadily winning the battle against the rust. I've also been working on getting off the seized up nuts and screws. What I ended up doing, at least on this side so far, I still have to do the other side, is cutting them off. If you look here, you can see that these are actually solid brass nuts, and they feed into a rivet, and that's passed through the chassis and then mushed over. You can see that here. So that's actually part of the nut on the other side. So that's why you can't just pop the nuts off. They'll rotate a little bit, but you can't pull them off. And when you've got the shaft seized up inside with rust and then broken off, a little hard to get them out. So what I used was a Dremel tool, but not one of these crappy cutoff wheels like I've used in the past, where you feed them through this mandrel with a little screw. And these things are just, they're pretty brittle, and they break and chip and they wear away pretty fast, and you get this material just going everywhere, and then little bits of black stuff all over. Well, anyways, I went to the Home Improvement Center and I found these, which are fantastic. So there's a little kit here, Dremel Easy Lock. So not only do you get these metal cutting discs, but you get this nifty little mandrel that doesn't even use a set screw anymore. And this cuts through brass like butter and does a pretty darn good job on steel too. So I was able to cut up the nuts. So you can see here the nuts. I basically just came in from the side and just cut it down, but still couldn't get the remains of the nut off because there's a bit of brass on both sides, and I didn't want to come too close with the cutoff wheel that I would dig into the steel and mar it all up. So what I did after that is I switched to the milling bit and just worked from the bottom and just wore down the brass enough that I was able to just pop it out with a hammer and a little nail punch. So I'll do the same thing over here and then on the other side. What I'd like to show you guys though is just how good these cut off. I don't want to damage my camera though, so I'm going to try to set up a little demonstration and put a piece of safety glass in front of my camera lens and show you how well these things really work. So with that stuff out of the way, then what I switched to was some rust stripper and some coarse sandpaper, like so. And bit by bit, I've been wearing it away. So I've got quite a bit of the rust gone on this side and on the transformers. Now I'm toying with the idea of pulling the transformers out. I'd really like to, because I'd be able to paint them more readily if I do. So you can see I've gotten pretty much the rust off the top, but there's some rust in between, and it's pretty hard to get in there. Likewise, it'll be hard to paint in there. And then there's also the seam along the bottom here. But to get these off, well, you got all these little tabs here, and I was reading online that these are kind of brittle, so you run the risk of snapping them off. I had the same issue with this Radiola chassis, but these tabs are much bigger, so there's a lot more to bend, and I was able to pry these up and I'll be able to bend them back down without too much metal fatigue. These are thicker and shorter though. On the other hand, some of them aren't bent over all that much, like this guy here, or this one's like barely even bent over at all. And I really just need to get one of them out. So I can leave the larger power transformer in place with all these wires here. If I can get this guy out, which just has 4 wires going to it, then I can get, of course, be able to work on this outside the chassis. And then it won't be butting up next to the power transformer, so I can work on that while it's still attached. So we'll see. I guess what I'll try to do is, what I used on the Radiola chassis was a small chisel, small cold chisel, to get it in under here, and then use a little light tap with a hammer to kind of start prying it up. So I'll give it a try. And I'll try it on one or two. If they seem like they're going to snap off, I guess I can always stop. Otherwise, I'll proceed. There's only 6 tabs, and boy, that'll make things a lot easier if I can just get this one out. I set up a piece of safety glass to protect my camera while I try to perform a little demonstration of how these Easy Lock cutting wheels work. To attach one, you pull back on this collar here and align the disc, and it snaps into place like so. For demonstration, I'm going to just cut this screw in half. I do have safety goggles on, because bits of metal are going to go flying. Just going to hold it in a pair of pliers here while I cut it off. Just like that. So, good stuff. Now, once I do get the rust off, like I pretty much have over here, the metal that's left is extremely pitted. Worst I've ever seen. So what I thought I'd try is this material I discovered at the hardware store. I went hunting around in the Bondo section and found this stuff. Glazing and spot putty. Fills pinhole scratches, minor dings, and hairline cracks. For use on body filler, metal, wood, fiberglass, standard primer paint. So it's not meant for really deep, major fills. But I'm hoping it'll work well on this, because it dries quick and then you can sand it and primer over it. Otherwise, there's certainly other products I can try, but this was cheap and it seemed like it might be easy to use. It wasn't easy, but I think I've just about got this choke loosened up. I started out with chisel and a hammer, and chewed up the end of the chisel pretty good. I got it in below each of the tabs, a few taps, and gradually wedged these up a bit, and then I switched to some pliers, and pretty well got them straightened out. This side, they lifted right out. This side, they're wedged in next to the ones on the transformer, so I'm going to have to flip this over and use a little bit of muscle. I also carefully unsoldered all the wires after making note of where they go. Alright. That's much easier to work on now. And they'll be able to get the rust out of this better, because now I can paint the undersides. See the laminated cores in there. One gigantic filtered choke, or a couple chokes actually. Thought there might be some rust underneath there, but no, actually it's in really good condition. With that big filter choke out of the way, it's been a lot easier to tackle this rust. And I've pretty much got this side done. This is by far the worst rust I've ever had to deal with. It's taken several days of constant application of this rust stripper to get it to this point. There's pretty much only rust left down at the bottom of the deepest pits. I also was working on this side earlier, and you can see that after I got the rust off and wiped it clean, the rust returned after a few days. So it's really important that you get primer or something on these clean surfaces as soon as possible. After the acid wash, it's really clean metal, and it seems like if the air is humid, it starts rusting really quickly. I think that Bondo filler I want to try can work on top of primer, but I gotta double check that. Well, let's see. Use on body filler, metal, wood, fiberglass, and sanded primer and paint. Alright, so this sure sounds like it'll work over primer. I'm going to be using this stuff. I'll just put it on with a small brush. I've used this stuff before. It works really well. You can actually even just put this on metal that's still rusty, as long as you clean up any loose flakes or anything. If you don't, of course, when the metal flakes off, it'll ruin your paint job. But I like to get all the rust off as much as possible, so to really minimize any chance of it coming back.